Okay. End of the day, there was a lot of stuff to cover today. I realize we're all over on time. I also am utterly tired because I came from Paris yesterday. I wasn't supposed to be here because there was a strike in Paris about everything, but I'm here, so I'm happy. So, who am I? I'm Chris Heilmann. I'm Code Poet on Twitter. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm a principal program manager in Microsoft. So basically what I do is look after the developer tools in the browser, in the new upcoming browser, and Visual Studio Code and the interaction between the two. I'm a member of the W3C. I've been 20 years web developer, paid web developer, not just a random thing, just basically seen everything that you needed to see, and very broken person because of that. I worked at eToys, Agilicis, Yahoo, Mozilla, blah, blah, blah. Wrote a lot of books, blogged since 2004, and very loud on Twitter. The slides are available, so aka MS Web Multiverse. I'm going to send them out later on as well. And I want to talk today a bit about like making you feel better about all the people in here that feel overwhelmed with all the stuff that you saw today, with all the stuff that you see every day, and all the things that we're supposed to know as web developers. And I always wonder, like, where do I get the time? You know, on LinkedIn, you can give people props for their knowledge. I wished I had the time that people give me props for to learn these things that I'm supposed to know, because most of the time I don't. But they're like, you heard he talked about it. He's probably an expert in React. Okay, fair enough. I've been working for a long time on the web, and I started with websites, and that's a simple thing. Then I went on to e-commerce templates. Then I went on to portals like Yahoo.com was one of the things I built back then. Then I worked on developer products like YUI library, a few other libraries, and build libraries. Then on a browser, Firefox OS, and then Microsoft Edge as well, the first one. And now I'm working on developer tools. And the best thing about that one is, don't feel bad if you don't know anything right now, if you don't like what you're doing right now. Our market is huge, and there's always good new things for you to try out. You can always jump to another department. You can always do something different. It's the mindset of knowing things and wanting to learn things that makes you successful. Because we're always complaining about the web not catching up. If you saw Andre's talk earlier, it was always like, yeah, the web is always this, like, it's not as good as native and it's never going to be a thing. But it's actually a roaring success if you look at it. It's not the success where everybody gets super excited about, like, we got to be web developers. That was 1997, 1998. Nowadays, it's like, well, okay, web is there. It's just a thing that we have. It's hard to imagine a world without the World Wide Web. Try to do anything without touching the web in one way or another right now. Almost everything is connected, not necessarily to the World Wide Web, but to the internet at least. And web technologies are standardized, and browser differences are negligible. Whenever web developers of nowadays say like, oh, there's a difference between Safari and Chrome. And I'm like, have you ever seen Internet Explorer 5? Do you know what I've seen? Did you cry yourself to sleep every night just because things didn't render? And open source has matured from a niche in technology that runs the web. Like, when I was starting as an open source developer, and I started from open source from the very beginning, and people are like, you're giving your stuff away for free? What's wrong with you? But nowadays, like, even if you look at Azure, almost every server on Azure is a Linux machine because it makes no sense to pay money for a server. I didn't say that. Documentation is plentiful, free and interactive. If you want to know something about the web, go to the MDM web docs, and you probably have an interactive example there, and you probably have something to play with there, or a code pen that's linked, or a JS fiddle that's linked, and you can interact with that and debug with other people. So we have all these wonderful things, but the web is also an absolute mess at the same time. And that's always the thing that confuses me. When I use websites and when on my fast connection on my great computer, I wait for hours for interactions. I don't know what's going on. For example, I flew over here with an airline that I'm not going to name. It's a Polish airline with 3 letters. And of course, I download the app because I want my boarding passes to be offline. This is why I download an app. That's why I go through the 32 megabyte download of an app to have my boarding passes offline. What does the app do? It's a big iframe, and it loads the website in there and does nothing on my machine. And I'm like, this was the biggest waste of download for a long, long time. Well, there's also Xcode with 17 gig of data byte, but whatever. I was just thinking, like, how can you release this and not realize that the thing that it should do for me, for my extra step of downloading the app, is missing? And of course it happens because somebody says, other airlines have an app, we should have an app as well. Do we want to think that through? Nah, just put an iframe in there, load the thing. There's a blatant lack of accessibility on the web as well. If you look at some of the statistics, how many images don't have alternative text? How many buttons are too small? How many things cannot be translated into other languages, although every browser allows you to translate those websites? It's quite brutal. These are easy to fix as well. There's security problems. People do blatantly stupid things in security, just, like plain text passwords that they send you in an email and then they wonder when they get hacked. Performance issues, things are slow, things are big. And there's a need for blockers, for ad blockers, just to make the web safe and also less annoying. When a news website has that much text and that much ads around it, something went wrong. Something didn't go where it was supposed to go the way we wanted to have the web. And there's lots and lots of reasons for that, and I'm not going to go through them. And basically, everybody has a reason why the web is broken. And instead of just thinking about what can we do, we always push blame towards each other. Like, oh, these new developers in the Silicon Valley make the web broken. No, the people who don't want to embrace new technologies make the web broken. Aliens are there too, or whatever. And I've thought about like, where do we find the real fix? What is the problem with that? I don't know if they know that person, but it's hilarious that we're in an area like this where it's about aviation. Because this person is Abraham Wald. He's a statistician. And he's kind of responsible for the outcome of the Second World War the way it's supposed to be. You know, where the people lost that people are voting for right now, which is a bad idea. What he did was actually he got these schematics of fighter planes when they came back from the war, and they showed them where the hits of the bullets came in. And that way they actually asked people, like, how do we make these planes safer? How do we make sure that people survive when they go out and basically bomb another country? And of course, the first thing to think is like, where the most bullets are, that's where we fortify the planes, because that's where actually they took the most hits. But he was one of the only few people that said like, hang on, the planes that didn't come back got hit in the other parts. So that's where we should fortify them. So the most obvious solution was the thing he didn't go for, and that way he actually made it much safer for other people. And I found the same thing with the web. I thought 20 years, 24 years of experience, I should be able to tell people what it means. And then I realized we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So listening is actually much more important than speaking, which is ironic. I'm on a stage with a microphone, I know. But we started listening much more to our end users. So instead of building more and more features into our products, instead of like thinking this is what people want, we ask people what they want. Sounds like a too simple solution, but it's actually an interesting one. So I'm in the middle of a launch. I'm in the middle of releasing the new browser based on Chromium, which is going to come out on the 15th of January through Windows Update. This means 30 million users now in the insider build, roughly, up to 830 million installs. I'm scared, but it's going to happen. And in this case, what we actually realized, the user needs are much more important than the opinions that we have. So we are actually interviewing people all the time. We're going around to end user clients. And the fun thing about it is, when you start listening to people, you find all kind of different users. This is like a few people that I met. And this is generally just a good idea for you to consider when you're thinking about what technology do I use next. A lot of these people exist, and a lot of these people are there to spend money on time or effort onto our products. As software developers, our job is to build things to allow people to do things. It's not about us, it's about our legacy, it's about how easy our products are to use. When I can't get my boarding pass, I'm pissed off. You as the developer failed in this case, or the product manager or the people above them. So the first one is the user we always want. The keeping it current user, you know, the person that has one browser, they customize the browser for themselves, they want to have it up to date to stay secure, and most of the time they're nowadays on a mobile phone. We had that in another talk, that the statistics are that most of the traffic is on the mobile phones nowadays. But then you also have the user that's totally okay to have an older browser and doesn't actually want a browser to update all the time because they're on a terrible connection or they're on an older device that doesn't have any space anymore. They don't want to download a browser all the time. Then you have people that just go online at work. They just, on their mobile phone, they play some games, they basically watch television at home, they do things, weird things like dealing with their kids and like shopping and eating and sleeping instead of sitting on their computer. Weird, you know? and they just go online at work, and the company actually defines what they actually can go on the web, what websites they're allowed to look at, and what websites they're actually using there. Then there's the cautious user that don't trust the web, that basically like, oh my God, everything is evil. I just put every blocker on the planet on my machine and make sure that the web is safe. These are also the same people who have like 4 virus scanners running and wonder why their computer is slow. But that happens to all the time. My favorite is the Stockholm Syndrome user. The people that actually used the web in a certain way for a certain time that is absolutely horrible, but don't want to change anything. My company told me 10 years ago, this is the right way to interact with this. I don't want anything simpler. I want this way to deal with the web. I'm happy to click 15 times through a form field rather than use a slider or drag and drop interface because I don't trust this newfangled stuff. So with that research, I learned a lot of weird things and somehow bitter pills to swallow. To different users, a browser, the thing that I'm putting all my effort in, is either something they cannot control because the company gives them one browser to rule them all, and that's basically it, or something they very cherish and highly customize. They have 10,000 add-ons that are all interfering with the performance of my browser, but they want these add-ons because otherwise they're not going to use it. Or it's irrelevant. They all work good enough. They don't know what it is. Who here has an iPhone? Who here uses anything else than Safari on an iPhone? Liars, you don't. Because under the hood, only Safari is allowed to be on iOS. It is an interface on top of Safari, but you're using Safari. How do you feel now? A browser is nothing worth changing the habits for. I mean, this browser worked before. I have 10,000 bookmarks. I don't want to have anything else in there. And the biggest problem that I found is that security and privacy are things that people control for them. They trust the platform to do security and privacy for them. They don't want to think about it themselves. They're happy to use the great password 123, on 10 different websites and wonder when they somehow get hacked. So a fix seems to be somewhere else. We cannot rely on people to actually fix the web for themselves or actually be vocal enough to ask us to fix the web for them. It might be up to us to fix the web. And we're all living well off the web. We're actually having a good job for the next few years. And this means taking ownership and caring for the different needs of different constituencies, for these different users, and thinking about them. How would a user like that look at my product and not the cool kid in the Silicon Valley on the iPhone that spends $400 a day on different websites? They don't exist. That's only VC people believe they exist. We can't expect users to care enough to fix the web, so we need to empower developers, maybe. Now, the weird thing with developers is that most of them are people. And I like people. Some of my best friends are people. And I also realized that there's massively different developers out there. So for different developers that I met, this is a job developer. I work for a company that defines the tools in the computer setup. Of course I know there's better tools out there, but I don't care because the company doesn't allow me to use other tools anyways. We bought licenses for that editor. We have to use them. So why bother learning about anything else? The switched on developer, that's again the one that we assume that everybody is. Like, oh, it's frustrating that there's still people out there with old computers. It's frustrating that users don't know what that is. It's frustrating that I have to think about accessibility rather than people around me. Then there's, of course, the startups. The I'm here to deliver developer, or the little agencies that have middle level clients. They're like, whatever I put in there has to be making some money for me or be getting paid for by the customer. So, of course, GraphQL would be cooler, but the customer doesn't pay for that. They want to have their MySQL database with a WordPress front end. And I don't want to think more about it because I don't get paid for that. Then there's the web is broken developer that like they always work with higher programming languages like Java and C++, and mostly old people and like with suspenders and beard. But they don't like the web at all. And then there's the most frustrating one that I found, which is the new developer. People that just start out as a web developer and are completely overwhelmed by the amount of opinions that they're getting. They're not getting information, they're getting opinions. The one senior developer tells them that's the only way to do it. The other senior developer says that's the only way to do it. And this is how we actually make our market not interesting for new people, but actually more frustrating. I've seen a lot of people that started, and then half a year later, I'm going back to goat farming or become a florist or whatever, because your computer people are just not good enough for me. I don't understand what you're doing. The learnings there for me were also kind of bitter to swallow. Like the caring developer is a tiny fraction of the market. That's the people that come to events. That's the people that read blog posts. That's the people who comment, that file bugs, that actually do forks on open source projects. But they're a really tiny bit of the market. A lot of people, it's a job to make a living. And it's understandable because it's kind of one of the last safe jobs out there. Everything else gets automated away or replaced by Amazon or something like that. My whole family is coal miners and factory workers. They're all like, they have no idea what I'm doing, but they're all very worried about the future. New developers don't find an empathic open world, but an avalanche of choice and opinion. So instead of like us supporting them, like, I had to go through all of that, so you don't have to anymore. We're like, you should also suffer. Here's a bad text editor, and here's an old browser. You go for that. And satisfying developer needs has no direct correlation to creating better user products. As browser makers, we've been focusing on the cool developers for a long, long time. But whatever we give you, it doesn't really mean that web products get much better. Best example, we've got wonderful breakpoints in the browser, in the text editor. What do people use? Console log. Over and over again. So for new developers, it's kind of confusing why they should learn the basics, why they should understand what HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is about. Because browsers cannot break the web. We have to swallow anything that you throw at us as developers and render something out. And it's amazing what we have to support. When we created the first Edge, we had to support a lot of like Safari-only CSS features because people relied on them. We had like buttons only with WebKit gradient backgrounds. And without that being supported would be a white button with a white text, which is like an interesting thing to learn, but not necessarily for end users. It should not happen. If it works, why bother learning why? So if it's just there, full Stack Overflow development. We just copy and paste from Stack Overflow until it works and change some numbers around. And we don't even think what we're doing. So if it doesn't work, there's an ample of resources to learn quick fixes. Again, Stack Overflow, the most upvoted things are not the things that explain things. They're the things that look cryptic and fast. Oh, that performs. Use that. It's safe too. Don't worry about it. So we're actually more interested in abstractions as new developers nowadays because we had that earlier in the talk as well, where we actually learning the web isn't a desirable skill. The basics are not in interview questions any longer in there. It's more interested that abstractions get you eyeballs on job boards. I'm a React developer with 5 years longer experience that React exists or something like that, which you often see in job ads like marketing, this is new, put it in there. Abstractions promise faster turnaround and great products, and companies use them. It works for Facebook, so your 5-page website will also scale with it, so use that one. And I found to a degree that tech innovation isn't quite the answer. It's like this golden calf of like keeping innovating and doing new things that makes us better and makes the web better. Constant change in the developer world is a double-edged sword. For us, it's cool. But we empower a small group of highly motivated people, of people who go to events, of people who read blog posts, who read Twitter all day long, at the cost of overwhelming others, of these new engineers that come into the market and say like, I tried for 3 months to do something, everybody told me something different, I'm leaving again, I don't want this. We innovate to fill a specialist need and call it a success because it's new instead of solving real problems. It's faster, it scales to millions of users, and most of the products that build to scale to millions of users have hundreds of users if you're lucky. We just put a lot of extra infrastructure in to scale to a world that we might want to have. So we don't find out about real problems anymore as we don't ask people outside our bubble. We just go on Twitter, do you like this? Cool, we got to put this feature in, instead of sitting down with real end users. I had one web developer that I interviewed, and she was running 10 different websites for different hospitals in America, like huge hospitals, really expensive ones. She used Dreamweaver and FTP to upload the websites. And that was last year, and I was just, you're kidding, right? Not even SFTP, FTP. And I was just sitting there, these people exist. Okay, I had no idea any longer. So let's kind of focus on delivery. So what does it really matter what we do? How do we make people happy on the web? What do we do? I think it's a pyramid. The first thing we must do, we must deliver in all of the products that we do, is availability. If the thing is not available, you're not going to have any end users, you're not going to make happy people, you're not going to make any money. It has to be accessible. If people can't see it, if people can't press it, if people can't play with it, they're not going to use it, you're not going to make any money, you're not going to have a good time. It has to be security, because people are too stupid to deal with their own security. It has to be mutability. It has to have a mutability to user needs. If somebody is blind, it has to talk to a screen reader. If somebody needs a bigger font, and you have to be able to resize the interface and do it there. If somebody has another language, they can use the browser to translate it into another language. You don't need to do that for them. Once you set that up, we can add a bit of quality with a should rather than a must. That is enhanced performance. Think about preloading things. Think about using service workers to do offline functionality that basically the thing gets streamed from people's mobile phones rather than from your server all the time. Extended availability, offline, same thing. Customizability. If users say like, hey, I want this change, I want only to see these things. If Slack is great in that way. If I do something in Slack for 5 times, it's just like, by the way, is that a workflow? Shall I create a bot for you to do that for you? And computers can do that nowadays. Why don't we do that more? And that creates delight. So that's the want, where I really want to go with our interfaces, which make full use of the platform. I have a payment system on this. Please don't ask me to type in my credit card on a mobile phone any longer. Let me pay with my operating system, payment system. Let me log in with my camera. Let me log in with my finger. Don't ask me again for another password. We have these standards already on the web. Predict use cases and prevent simple mistakes. Telephone number should be in this format. Done. I'm not going to use your website any longer. It's like I have a copy and paste already from my browser what the telephone number looks like, and there might be there might be a dash in there, there might be parentheses in there. That is nothing that I, as the end user, should have to change. Your system should be clever enough to get this out and then say like, does it look like a telephone number? Do a call in the background, see if it works. These kind of things. And offer extended functionality, whatever people have on their device. You got a tablet with 2 cameras. You want to put some money in, some expenses. Take a picture, instead of like type in or upload the image or whatever. We love our tooling. We love browser developer tools. We love the editors. We have extensions and themes, terminals and their configuration, deployment and optimization tool chains, abstractions, components and libraries. And all of these, we spend days discussing what is the professional way to do. Like your terminal should be black background and use a font with ligatures. Otherwise, you're not a professional developer. Bullshit. But that's what we discuss things, because we run out of things to discuss, because we don't talk with real people with their problems. And it's all a bit much. It overwhelms people. We overwhelm people who want to start with the web or just want to do their job. And we demand people to set up complex environments. We inhibit diverse contribution. The other day, somebody asked me to help him with a website. One single HTML page, no functionality, just I should take a look and feel, accessibility, like what it means. I find a typo in there. I'm like, okay, I'm a good citizen. I go on GitHub, I fork the thing, I download it to my machine, I do an npm install, npm build to see what it looks like. 150 megabyte download of Node modules. That didn't do anything and didn't work on my machine. For one HTML document. Now imagine I'm a new developer in Bangladesh that just wants to contribute to a project. They wait 3 weeks for these 150 megabyte to download and install before they can edit. Don't overwhelm people. We don't focus enough on human needs in our tools. We focus on like making more and more features in the tools. So my hypothesis is that tools are too complex. I look at the browser developer tools that I'm working on, and I'm like, what are all these things? I'm using like 10% of those, all the others, why are they even here? I don't want them, I don't need them, they're just confusing me. So we have a stack that we actually can do to help simplify developer development nowadays. So Node.js is to me the glue that puts everything together. Like before Node.js, JavaScript was just like a thing that I do like rollovers with, or like fancy things that we did in Flash before, but yet now it's JavaScript on the server. It enables us to create a highly customizable web infrastructure, servers, build tools, all in one language. And it elevated JavaScript from the how does browser so-and-so break to all kind of web tasks. I can, in the past, when I wrote things with Perl, when I wrote things with PHP or Apple script, if I really wanted to hate myself, instead I can now use JavaScript for almost everything that do these kind of tasks. Chromium is the open source engine of the web. And yeah, I don't like it either. I worked in Firefox for 4 years. I want more browsers, but developers have spoken. Chromium is the main engine that runs the open web these days because it's open source, it's multi-platform, it powers various browsers and app engines like Electron. It also powers Node. And it can be automated and scripted with Puppeteer. And it's just all these cool things that it does. No wonder developers love it. Visual Studio Code, the hackable editor, same things, open platform, extensible, customizable, based on Electron, includes Git version control. I love this. When I go to schools and I teach kids about programming and about the web, and I don't want to go like, oh, now we go to the other room and learn the Git commands for the next 3 days, and then we come back to HTML. In this case, oh, you changed the HTML file. Do you see this little M? This means merge. Now write what you've done to the file and press that M, and then we go on. And later on I explain to you what that means. It means that you cannot do anything wrong. Nothing you do will ever be lost again. And this is how version control is explained to people, I think. Has a built-in terminal. It's lightweight and code-focused. If you haven't seen it yet, Webhint, something I'm super excited about as well, is a testing tool to check web projects, and it automatically tests them for accessibility issues, performance problems, the app readiness. Do you have a service worker? Do you have a manifest? Compatibility with standards, like do you do things that are broken in other browsers? Common pitfalls to avoid, like this is a button, but it doesn't have a type called button, because browsers do weird things. We need this. Security issues, like this is probably not a good idea to have an XSS vector in there. And it's an online service, Webhint.io, or a node package to integrate into other tools. So you can use this in your CI, CD lines to actually do testing for all these things in a fully customizable manner. Not like something where a company says like, or a third party says, this is what you need to test. If you need to check that the footer of your website has a picture of a dancing elephant, you can actually write a little test for that and put that inside your node infrastructure as well. So putting all these things together and mixing and matching them is super powerful. So here's a few things that I'm doing with that in our teams, and also I'm selling to other people all the time. Webhint for code. Code is, we saw it earlier, like when there's something going wrong, code tells you how to fix it. And Webhint is available as a code extension. So what does that mean? I hope you can see that video here. So you see this squiggly line under that meta element up there. And when I go on that, it explains to me this was actually necessary, if the video runs. Yeah, this was necessary in olden days. It's not anymore. A button is actually a button element and needs a button type to work. An output element is not supported by Internet Explorer. That's a bad thing either. So you can not only read what's going on and what this element means, while you're typing, it also tells you when you're doing something wrong. So in this case, image source, whatever, and you don't give it an alternative text, it starts complaining and tells you like, by the way, images should have an alternative text because otherwise they cannot be seen or understood by people who can't see. They cannot be indexed by search engines. They cannot be found by any of your tooling out there. So I love that mostly because instead of teaching people how to do things and then letting them debug and then go back and fix it, it prevents me from doing stupid things from the beginning. It prevents me from making mistakes. And the more I use it, the more I don't make these mistakes anymore because I kind of understand what I've been doing. This is also available as an add-on for all browsers, for like Edge, for Chrome, for Firefox, not for Safari, but we'll work on it. And that one also does it in the browser then. So any website, you can click a button, it analyzes the website, it runs it automatically. You can see it scrolling and that kind of things for the performance things. And then it gives you an audit report that you can send to your product manager, you can send to your manager, you can send to whoever. It's also a node module called Hint. So you can use that in all of your automated things. So what's coming next? And this is partly my world, but it's basically, it means that lots and lots of Windows users will get that, what I'm talking about. And Mac users. I mean, I'm a Mac user working for Microsoft. I know, don't tell anybody. But I'm using Edge on my Mac for a half a year now as my main browser. And it's basically, it works. I'm happy with that. So there's a canary, which is nightly build. There's a beta, which is a weekly build. There's a dev build, which is every 6 to 7 weeks. And that's exactly what the dev build, the beta build is going to be the one that actually will be one that end users will get on the end. What did we do in Chromium? We basically started playing in Chromium. Chromium runs the open web, as I said. And it was mostly only Google people contributing to it. Now we've got a few engineers in there that are also committers. So this project is now not only owned by one company. We did lots of bug fixes because it's a big project. We internationalized the browser, so now it's available in different languages, and the developer tools are available in different languages. Because we found out with our other tools that about a third of the users out there don't use their developer tools in English. They use them in German, in French, in Japanese, in Chinese, and the developer tools were never translated. They were never translatable, and now they are. And we made them keyboard accessible and also browser screen reader accessible. And keyboard accessibility is a wonderful thing. I'm a keyboard user. When I started, computers were so terrible that mouse was too slow. I taught myself all the keyboard shortcuts I ever need. It's fun because I don't know them. So people come up to me and say, "Oh, what was that?" And I'm like, "Well, look at my fingers. I don't know anymore. It's just automated." And I love that we can do that. When Photoshop got keyboard access out of a sudden because they were sued. They were like, people without a mouse should be able to use your tools as well. And out of a sudden, every designer realized I can now move a selection by pixel and not just with my mouse. Oh, I'm too much of it. It's too much again. And out of a sudden, it got better for everybody else. And that's the same thing there. One thing I'm working on is Elements for Code, in case you haven't seen that yet. It's basically the Chromium developer tools inside Visual Studio Code. So what does that mean? Is I don't have to switch to the browser to try a few things out. Right now, we write some CSS, or SAS, and then we actually go to the browser, we look at the website, we open the developer tools, we mess around with the CSS until it actually is exactly what we want, and then what then? Like, there's now a changes tab that tells us the changes in the file, but as it's generated by SAS, I don't necessarily can go directly back to where I was before. So we don't need to replicate the same functionality in both places. So what does that look like? It's actually in my code. I can access an instance of Edge or Chromium in this case, and I can run it in the background. So it goes away, and I don't have to go through it again. It embeds the browser in my in Visual Studio Code itself. And then I can mess around with the developer tools like I expect them to do, with all the color pickers and all the automated checking and finding out where things went wrong. And if you set up your project with a project file, then all the changes that you do automatically reflect back in your Visual Studio in your SAS file and not only in your CSS file. That also works for breakpoint settings, so you can set breakpoints in the browser and they reflect directly in the editor as well, and you can do all kind of things. This is experimental. It's 1.0 right now. I think a week we can say it's actually final build for that, but we need input on that if it's really that useful. We use it internally for lots of things. The great thing about working for Microsoft is like we got 127,000 people in the company, so whatever we build can get tested internally. But as I said before, we want more output from the outside. One last thing, if you think there's something on the web that you think is missing, and you want to describe it, and you want browser makers or the W3C to think about it, there's an idea or a product called webwewant.fyi, which is events, but also an online, just a form where you can type this thing in, explain what you mean by it, why it would be a useful thing. And there's 8 different browser makers in there, W3C members, and we're going to translate it into a specification for the W3C, and we're also for the best contributions, there's prizes for that. So in summary, the web is a diverse place. There's many different developers. There's many different users out there. Don't just assume that a user knows something. Don't just assume that the next developer understands something that you've done. We have a chance to make it easier for everyone to create quality products for all end users by moving the knowledge of the last 20 years, what we did on the web, inside our editing environments and not tell people like, you should have read that up before you wrote that terrible code. I love when the tool tells me not to write the code that is actually has an error in it. That makes total sense. We have an open source platform that open communication channels that powers the web, and that's the Chromium project, and that's all that it's based on, basically. And we accumulate a lot of knowledge. Why not add it to the tools and teach the creators of the web in context? That's kind of all I had. I'm CodePoet on Twitter. I'm Edge DevTools on Twitter. If you have anything in Edge that you find problematic, there's a smiley button that you can press that takes a screenshot of what you've done right now. That actually, please put an email in there so we can ask you questions afterwards, and then you can describe what the problem is. That means it goes directly into our bug queue. And that is what I do every Tuesday and Friday, Tuesday and Thursday. I go through that thing and allocate it to the engineers that are working on the thing. So punch the happy face to meet me. That's not a good message, but that's basically all I had. Thanks very much.
I have to say that even for me, that was amazing. Great information, very, very informative, and really well delivered. Thank you. Does anyone, we have a very short time left because we're a little bit over on time in terms of the location. Do we have one really good question for Chris? Heilmann? Don't ask anything stupid, no. What? You have a question?
CSS logical properties is coming inside to the browsers, and I didn't see responsive design. There isn't the inline size property inside the major rule that is very important for logical properties. It's need to become inside. It's something that I don't see any update on major rules of logical properties.
That's a W3C thing. Okay. webwe1.fyi. Write it there, write it up, I bring it to the specs body. Thank you.